Here's a few things that you can say when someone's struggling.
Yes.
You could say, wow, that sounds really hard. That sounds really, and then you pick a feeling that you might be experiencing listening to them, or put yourself in their shoes. What might they be feeling? That sounds really hard, heartbreaking, sad, terrible, like whatever. That's it. And if you get it wrong, they'll be like, no, it's not really heartbreaking. It's more like devastating.
Yep.
Okay, now you know more about their experience. The other thing is, it makes sense you feel that way. I don't feel like getting up in the morning. Yeah, it makes sense you feel that way. I don't think I would be able to. I'm surprised you're up right now. Pretty amazing.
Well, hello there, and welcome to a very special episode of the Terri Cole Show. I just had a deep dive conversation with my friend, Shaun Galanos, and you might know Shaun online as The Love Drive. That is his handle on Instagram. That is how I actually just got turned on to his work on Instagram and loved it so much. He's a speaker and a coach, and his deal is helping people have better, more loving relationships with better communication. And I met him in person at the beginning of this year. We were doing an event together in Vancouver, the Real Love Ready event. And he was giving out love advice. It was great. And it was so nice to actually meet him in person. If you don't follow him, you definitely want to. We dive deep into what he's experiencing in his life, how he became a love expert, but also his father just passed away. He just broke up with in his relationship. And then he tells the story of being robbed like 2 months after his father died, and how he went on this chase and what actually happened between he and the robber. You do not want to miss this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed interviewing Shaun. I am so excited to welcome my friend, Shaun Galanos, to the show. I've been trying to get you here for a long time, and welcome, Shaun.
I'm so happy to be here. It was so great to meet you in Vancouver last year, or earlier this year. Yeah.
So much fun. You guys, we were doing an event together, and Shaun, you were giving advice. You were the love advice table. What were you doing?
Yeah, just free love advice with my sign. There's one of them right here.
Oh my God, it's great. I love it so much. It was all about love. And it was really a love fest. We were like, we have to be best friends forever now.
And here, this is us continuing that.
Correct. All right, so let's start with, I gave your whole bio at the top of the show so people know who you are and what you do, but I want to know, before we get into what's happening now, like, how did you find yourself becoming a love coach, a love expert? Like, how did this happen?
Kind of by accident, I think some 10 years ago, 2014, actually, living in San Francisco, I started driving a taxi. And that is fun for a little bit until it's just not that fun, And my friend said, you should record your conversations with your passengers. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I'd always had this like bottomless well of passion and energy to talk about love and relationships and sexuality. And so I decided to record my conversations with my passengers. And I called it the Love Drive because we'd drive around talking about love in San Francisco, and put those videos on YouTube. And that was sort of the beginning of how I got into doing this. I just kept doing it. I started writing blog posts. I started a podcast, started making videos, got certified as a coach, and just kept working around this field. A lot of the stuff that I learned experientially or through books. I don't have any formal training other than some rape crisis counseling, a bachelor's degree in communications, but really it's all been like from my desire to understand people and understand relationships, and also help people connect better in a more authentic way using our words, basically. That's how I got here.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit about growing up.
I mean, grew up in Montreal until I was about 13, and then we moved to the States, and have always just loved being in relationship or dating or flirting or sex. Like that's always been
sex.
That's always been interesting to me. I think earlier than that, though, I was always a really emotional child. I had big feelings. I didn't know how to deal with them. My parents didn't necessarily know how to deal with them either. Definitely did the best they could, and they were totally present, but I just felt so much. And at some point, I discovered drugs and alcohol as my solution to these big feelings, because for me, sobriety, just like regular life, was overwhelming, right? The breadth and the depth of how I felt and not being able to put any words to these feelings was just really overwhelming. And so I turned to drugs and alcohol to sort of mute the feelings. I eventually got sober at 25, and then all those feelings came back. They were there, and I had to deal with them, right? One by one by one. And it's been a long road to accepting this like vast and complex emotional landscape that I have, and also putting words to all these emotions, and then eventually helping people deal with and speak about what's happening in their lives in the moment. So that's a little bit about, that's the TLDR of me growing up.
So do you find in your audience, because you have a big platform, you have a lot of like people are very drawn to your work, they're drawn to your style. I know you from social media. That's how we initially, and then I saw that we had a lot of friends in common. But actually, I just got turned on to your work because they were like, suggested, we think you'll like what this guy talks about. And I was like, yes, I do. And so I saw I was certainly not alone in that. Is your population more women, more men? What are the biggest questions or queries? Like, what are people struggling with when it comes to love? I know that's like 7 questions, but answer them in any order.
I mean, the audience is largely female, right? We're talking 85, 90% women. When I do courses, when I do retreats, when I do groups, it's a lot of women and some men. And I wish I could have access to more men, but I didn't go out looking for a female audience. I started talking and thinking and processing love and relationships and intimacy and sexuality in a way that makes sense for me. And I just started throwing content out there to see who would resonate with it. And it was a largely female audience. So I don't know how to get more men, short of like asking women to like suggest it to their male friends, or like running Super Bowl ads, which I'm not going to do. So that's the audience. What am I helping people with? What is the stuff that I come up with a lot? Like, what are the main questions? A lot of it is, can I ask for what I want? Can I be honest about the guy that I'm dating, that I want a relationship? How do I tell someone that I'm actually not available for anything emotional? I'm actually just looking for sex. How do I get a lot of these, like, how can I be honest about what I'm feeling without pushing people away or without looking too needy? This is a big one, right? I think for the most part, and I do speak very generally a lot of the time because you kind of have to when you have such a large audience. Mm-hmm. Women are really scared of looking needy, which is, to me, like, it's very sad. It's very sad that, like, and I can relate, because I don't really want to overwhelm anybody with my needs either. Right. And I have a course called Getting Your Needs Met, which identifies like what are inside job needs. You know, these are the needs that, like, self-worth, self-validation, self-esteem, like this stuff, we can't really get it externally. Right. You can get a little bit of it, and it's like a balm a little bit for the wound, but it's just still there. Right. And what are needs that we should expect other people to meet for us, right? So those are some of the big questions. There's also a lot of stuff around, like, how do I even say that I'm looking for a relationship, right? How do I even say that what you did was hurtful to me? So I have another course called Healthy Communication, where I just kind of outline, like, this is how you could pretty much ask for anything and say no with love without really pushing people away. Of course, you can't control how people are going to respond, no matter like what language you use. Some people, it's always going to be the wrong thing. It doesn't matter how you couch it, they're going to be offended. And we really do have to divorce ourselves from how people are reacting, as long as we're doing our best in how we're communicating. So those are some of the things that come up, like, over and over and over again.
I think the neediness thing is a major thing, and I see this in my work as well. with women in particular. Probably 10% of my audience is men. And I would say women in particular, because my audience are such ballers,
Yeah.
they really do not want to seem quote unquote needy. And I think that really is it's a whole process of learning what are healthy needs, what is important. The way that I break it down with boundaries is like preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers, right? Not every need or desire is the same, but at the very least, we need to know what's important to us and then figure out the words to try to get that need met, to see if that person is capable. And I think that I love that you have such a focus on communication, Shaun, because it's such a hard topic. And it's something that people, I don't know why, but they like associate like communicating with like being extra and being too much. And I'm like, no, man, just this actually cuts down on the extraness if you're an effective communicator.
Yeah.
We
just didn't get this education growing up. Right? I mean, if you have great role models, amazing. You're probably in the like 10% of people. For the most part, our parents were dealing with different stuff. I mean, my parents were just trying to survive. The emotional maturity wasn't a thing back then. Like you probably got smacked around a little bit more than you do now. It was different. We grew up differently, and we have more knowledge now. We have more tools. And we have a better understanding of it, just how complex the whole emotional landscape is.
Yep.
And so we have to learn this somewhere. We're not learning it in school. Love education, relationship education doesn't exist. Sex education in the United States doesn't really exist either.
No.
So I think Nora McInerney said, we're literally just bumbling around practicing on each other, which is amazing. Like, if you could just remember that when you're like fucking up in a relationship, just know that you're literally like doing the best you can. You're practicing on somebody, and hopefully the next time you could do it a little bit better. Yeah. It's hard.
It is hard. And then you have life, right? I know that you're coming through right now. You and I were talking before we went on air, and you've been very vocal publicly about what your father passed. Sorry to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
You broke up with your girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So can we talk a little bit about how you're managing all of these things while you have this, in a way, this public life too?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I just took a sabbatical.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have enough savings to not have to work for 3-4 months. And it would have been really, really inauthentic for me to keep showing up and like slinging courses and endorsing other people's books. And, I just I couldn't do it. When my father passed in June, I could barely take my dog out. I didn't want to get out of bed. I pushed everybody away. I got closer to my mom, which was nice, but she lost the love of her life, together for 42 years. And I lost my best friend and a role model and a mentor, and he was not a perfect man, but he was a great man. And I just couldn't show up. I couldn't show up until I sort of started to resurface a couple weeks ago. And the first thing I did was I told people, like, I'm not doing okay. Here are the things that happened. It has not been easy for me. This has been very, very challenging, and I'm doing the best I can, and I'll show up any way I can. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Right? I just sort of let the waves of grief wash over me, and sometimes they pass quickly, and sometimes I'm in sort of a deep place, a dark place for a couple days. And I try to keep doing the things that I know are good for me. Sleeping, eating, exercising, taking my dog out, the bare minimum, paying my freaking taxes, all that stuff. Because I don't want it to bite me in the ass later,
Right.
So that's how I've been sort of dealing with it. It's been super challenging. And it's also been kind of rich. It's been really beautiful and complex. And I still get to have a relationship with my father, even though he's passed. Mm-hmm. I still get to reminisce, and I have some regrets. I do have some regrets. I thought I had told him everything, and turns out I didn't,
But can you tell him now?
I can tell him now. Yeah. Do I even have to tell him now? I don't know. Maybe he already knows.
Probably not. He probably does already know, but it's interesting that, having regret sort of after the fact, is it just really that you wished you had more time?
Man, I so wish I would have moved to California. When I moved from Montreal, I was like looking to get closer to my parents, but they lived in Hawaii and I wasn't going to move to Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
But now I wish I had moved to the Bay Area, which they eventually moved to the Bay Area. But I wish I had just spent more time. But then, to be honest with you, my dad, it's funny now I could speak about him freely. He didn't want me to talk about him at all.
Right, right.
He is a very private person, and so he's like, just don't talk about me. And I was like, can I tell people I have parents? He's like, I'd prefer if you didn't. I'm like, all right, wow. Talking about boundaries, right?
Wow, that's hardcore.
A hardcore boundary. And well, now he's passed. So anyways, and I love him. So I'm not going to not talk about him. I forgot where I was going with that.
Oh, talking about wishing he had more time.
It would have been, oh yeah, that's right. He didn't
Regrets.
he didn't say, hey, I'd really love for you to spend more time with me.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't make it easy. Right. He was happy to have a conversation on the phone every day and FaceTimes, but he was struggling with cancer. And it's really hard to be seen when you are dying, and he was like a super successful baller dude. And he was sick and he did it privately. He really didn't tell anybody that he was sick because he didn't want people to pity him or to see him any differently. And he sort of just did it privately. And it was, I had to respect that. That's like that was a boundary for him. And I totally respected it.
Yeah. It's brutal though, especially with someone who is a baller and like, they just don't want to be vulnerable in that way. And I think that with parents like that, my mother was sick over the pandemic. She's better now, but she had anal cancer and it was the whole thing. And she moved in with me and it was just, and she's a very independent person. Right. So, it's not, she did not want to move in with me and she did not want to trust me the moment she started being like, I'm not sure, like, I don't want to get in the way, but I wonder why Vic started getting critical of everything that was happening in the house. I was like, I think she's better. Time for her to go back to her house.
Bye.
She couldn't wait to get out. Trust me. She was like, bye. But again, I think it depends on the type of parent you have. If you have a parent where they stayed parenting, like, you know what I mean? Where the relationship didn't switch, where you became their caregiver, that it really is hard for them to let you see them in that way. One of my best friends just wrote a book about her father's death called I'm Not a Mourning Person. My friend Chris Carr. And it's actually, I read that book in like literally 4 hours. Amazing. Very compelling about her own, ongoing experience with grief and the nature of her own experience and how that changed her. And he died I think about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. But it might be a read one day that you might want to do.
Or people listening, link in the show notes for the book, I'm Not a Morning Person.
That's a good idea. Look at you. You must have a podcast.
As I'm listening here to Terri, I'm thinking about this idea of pride and how pride really can get in the way of us allowing others to see us. Right. I think my dad was a really proud man, and I think there's some beautiful qualities about that, but there's also some, it leads to a more private, a kind of a smaller existence because you really want to be seen a certain way. And I am slowly coming to terms with being seen a different way as someone who's just like not doing well, like in this moment, I'm doing great. I'm so happy to see you. And it's been a good couple of days. I've strung together a good couple of days, and that feels really good. But I am in a season of mourning. I am in like a sort of a dark winter of the soul kind of place.
Yeah.
And I'm usually a pretty happy-go-lucky, charismatic, gregarious, outgoing dude.
Yep.
And it is hard to come to terms with the fact that that's not always how it is and to allow people to see me that way. I've been, FaceTime calls with my friends this week and last week have been kicking my ass. I've been crying. Like people are like, how you doing? I'm like, well, not great. And then they'll look at me and I'll just start crying. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's beautiful to be able to access that level of vulnerability and to also have people that can hold that without trying to fix it. I think that's the beautiful thing, right? It's just witness. That's all we really want. I mean, I'll ask you if I need a freaking advice session. I generally do not. That's my
Same.
job. I'll do it myself.
And it doesn't feel good if someone's trying to fix you. Where what feels loving is if someone can bear witness and be in the foxhole with you.
I got little chills just, thinking about that and that the imagery of just like, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be anything for me. It's the whole thing with codependency and with control, overt and covert. And so much of what I'm writing right now, because I'm writing my next book on high functioning codependency. And so much is lost in this need to control others. And we don't see it, right? With codependency, it's so much of the time people don't see it clearly at all. Hence why I'm writing a whole fucking book about it, because we don't get it. And yet, if you're a silver lining detective, if you need to find the fucking silver lining in this person's horrendous experience, like, just fucking don't, please.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally don't. That's not for them. That is for you. The moment you say, well, at least he had a full life, like, just no, do not. Stop. Just don't say that. Don't say anything. Yeah. You cannot know what to say and still love someone who's in pain and who's in grief. It really is having the emotional courage to just fucking stay.
Yeah, sit.
Right?
Sit down and shut up.
But sit down and see the person, sit down and be present, because the thing is, your pain creates pain for me.
Yeah.
Right? I care about you. I don't want you to be in pain.
Yep.
It's not for me to not want you to be in pain. It's for me to decide, can I hang with you while you're wherever you are?
Yeah.
And that's love and that's friendship. And I think that it's, I don't know. I mean, I feel like you've done this in a really kind of revolutionary way for someone who you're well known as like a happy, upbeat guy. And you're showing the truth of what you've experienced, because you've been through hell and back, and it's not just your father's death. That's the main thing. Yeah. But ending a relationship is hard. You got robbed. That was a whole fucking thing. And then the weird, can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
With the getting robbed part? Well, before I do that, one thing is, you don't have to say anything, but also here's a few things that you can say when someone's struggling. Yes. You could say, wow, that sounds really hard. Fucking basic, Okay, here you go, everybody. Ready? That sounds really, and then you pick a feeling that you might be experiencing listening to them, or put yourself in their shoes. What might they be feeling? That sounds really hard, heartbreaking, sad, terrible, like whatever. That's it. And if you get it wrong, they'll be like, no, it's not really heartbreaking. It's more like devastating.
Yep. Okay,
now you know more about their experience. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is, it makes sense you feel that way. Again, super basic, I kind of feel like, I don't feel like getting up in the morning. Yeah, it makes sense you feel that way. I don't think I would be able to. I'm surprised you're up right now. Pretty amazing.
Yep.
Doesn't take much. You don't need to fill up the space. You just have to say, like, I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you. You could even say, wow, I don't really know what to say, but I'm here for you. Revolutionary, right?
Easy breezy. And yet in the moment, though, in order to do that, you have to know yourself some. You have to go, wow, this is painful. My friend being in pain is painful. And I feel like a lot of the high functioning codependents in my crew, we're like the crisis people. Mm-hmm. We are the people that you definitely want to call because we're great in a crisis. But what does it mean to be great in a crisis? I used to think when I was younger, in my 20s, being great in a crisis was getting it all done. I will help you plan the thing. If you got to plan a funeral, I got it. You need to this, I've already done the research. You need like the do of that. And as I've grown and had a million more years of therapy, I've realized that sometimes more than not, it's not about the doing. It's about the being,
Hey, don't get me wrong. We love doers. Every now and then you need a fucking doer. Like 4 days before my dad's funeral, I realized that the caterer, we just didn't have the fucking catering for the reception. I called my brother. I'm like, yo, I'm going on a climbing trip for 2 days before the funeral. Can you deal with the fucking caterers? Amazing. He's like, yeah, I'm on it. Fucking baller. He did it. So we love doers also. Sometimes you just have to ask before you jump into fixing, like, how can I be of service right now? Or just straight up, how can I help?
Yep.
And sometimes it's like, hey, I just want to share with you what's going on. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I need you to fucking deal with the catering.
Right. I always say, how can I best support you right now?
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes maybe it's not help. Maybe if I'm saying it to my husband, maybe it's like, let's fool around, or let's get in the truck and go somewhere, or let's whatever. I don't know how I can best support you, but I really want to.
Yeah.
And if I guess, I'm definitely going to get it wrong.
Yeah. I'm like, yo,
yes, I guess.
Come to Costco with me. I really need someone to come to Costco with me.
Totally.
You don't know. Yeah. If you guess, you're going to guess wrong for sure.
Fact.
Okay. Really quickly. I was robbed blind in Montreal. My bad. I left, I had a bike in my kitchen and you could see the wheel of the bike. And so in hindsight, if there's a bike in an apartment, even if you can't see the bike, you can only see a piece of it. People are going to assume it's a nice bike. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I come home. Yeah. Why is it in the house? I come home and it's a mountain bike, and you don't lock a mountain bike up outside.
Right.
Price of a used car. I come home and everything's gone. And it takes me a while to realize that everything's gone. I'm like, what? Something's off,
And this is after your father's passed. So your father died in June.
Father died in June. This is in beginning of August. It's 9 p.m. I come home. My dog is home. So my dog was home the whole time when someone broke into my apartment. They stole my mountain bike. They stole my computer. They stole my dead dad's computer. They stole my iPad. They stole my passports, my wallet, shoes, helmet, like everything. And I'm so grateful that I have my cell phone on me because I called the cops and then I called my friend and my friend was like, oh, use Find My iPhone. Because they have my laptop. And long story short, the cops came, because you want the cops to come so you can file a police report for insurance purposes. But then I kicked them out of the house, looked at Find My iPhone, realized that the dude was on the move in the metro in Montreal. I grabbed my car keys, I grabbed my blind dog, I grabbed a broomstick. I don't know. I don't know what it's Saturday night. I don't know where I'm going. I'm a little scared. I'm not like a vigilante. I'm not the Punisher. I'm a love coach, but I'm fucking pissed. I'm pissed and I want it. I want it all back. Long story short, I follow the guy. I find him. I turn the corner to get to a metro station. Homie is just standing there with my bike, with a neon yellow backpack with all my stuff in it. Like I knew when the backpack was gone, I was like, I think I could find this guy. He's got a neon yellow ski backpack. And so miraculously, there were cops right next to the guy, like just doing something else. And I go up to the cops and they go, hey, stop this guy. He's got all my stuff. And then they stop him and they go, do you have any photo ID? And I go, yeah, in the backpack is probably my passport. That should be good enough, right?
Yeah. You're like, does that count?
It counts. Anyways, I didn't press charges because the guy was, maybe like a 60-year-old drug addict.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to do much. A funny story is that he was wearing my shoes, a brand new pair of On Clouds. And somehow in the hour, I got robbed at 9. I found him at 10. I was back home by 11. I let him have the shoes. Because the cop was like, I don't think you want these back. They don't smell very good. And I told him, I don't want you to go to prison without any shoes. And props to On. I emailed them, told them I got robbed, sent them photos, and they sent me a new pair of shoes.
Oh.
Yeah. So long story short, use Find My and Air tags and just put those everywhere. And make sure that you always lock your apartment. And it was locked, by the way. They pushed the air conditioner in to get in.
Got it. So you got your dad's computer back too?
I got my dad's computer back with all the photos, all the documents, all the tax
God.
stuff. I know.
I know it's just stuff, but still, like there's something about that still having that I don't know. It would be really sad if that guy had sold it.
Yeah, he didn't have time. I mean, he did a great job of robbing me, but he did a really bad job of getting away with it.
That's the best end of a robbery story, maybe that I've ever heard.
It actually gets better because I didn't recover my wallet. That was the one thing I didn't recover. And I was like, where's my wallet? And he's like, I don't know. It should be in the backpack. And turns out that I found it like a week later. It was in my apartment somewhere else. So I falsely accused him of stealing my wallet, rightfully. So I almost feel like I need to make amends to the guy for accusing him of stealing my wallet. But luckily I didn't cancel my cards. And so I found all my cards back and that like saved me a little bit of headache for sure.
Angst. Exactly. Wow. That's awesome. All right. Let's switch it up a little bit. I want to talk about love. So you're always doling out advice. What I really appreciate about you, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, is like there's literally no question that you won't answer.
That's
People
true.
are like, let's talk about cunnilingus, shall we?
Anal sex for sure. Butt plugs, cock rings, nudes.
So if anyone is interested in any of that, make sure that you follow Shaun on Instagram. You're the Love Drive. Is that what you are?
Yeah, at the Love Drive. Everywhere on the internet, at the Love Drive.
It's so good. Like you just had your origin story and just made your thing with it, and just that's it from here on in.
I just like talking about stuff that we don't talk about. Like I like to be able to normalize things that like we should be talking about more, that maybe society said is improper, or that people are like, oh, if I talk about this, it's going to ruin the female male polarity. And then I'll be in my masculine. And then, 3 years down the road, he won't respect me because I asked him out on our first date, like, okay, maybe, but like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about some other, alternative theories that might be helpful to describe the dynamic that you're describing.
So what is your take on polyamory?
I think polyamory is quite interesting. I think some people have referred it to miracle grow for your character defects, which I like.
Yeah.
As in, like, you can't hide. Your shit is gonna come up. It's gonna come up if you're in multiple relationships. I think polyamory, it's interesting. I kind of am thinking about it for myself, and I've thought about this forever. I've always said that I'm open to being open in an open relationship. And I have this thing where I am like chronically dissatisfied with life. And that includes with relationships sometimes. I also have a lot of FOMO. I'm just terrified of missing out on everything, which means that I'm just never really happy with what I have. And that is not something that I am proud of. It is absolutely something that I'm working on. But sometimes I could look at polyamory as like the answer to the, desiring multiple people conundrum. Let's have your cake and eat it too. But more broadly speaking, I think polyamory is a type of relationship that is fine for some people.
Yep.
But it will require an elevated ability to communicate, an ability to be aware of what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, why it's coming up, the ability to sit with a lot of emotional discomfort, jealousy, all that stuff. And it probably isn't as much sex as you think it's going to be. Some people think it's just a free for all. You're going to be banging all the time. But the reality is that it requires sitting with a lot of people's different needs and your needs. And sometimes those often are going to be conflicting needs. Schedule conflicts, right? Like, how do you go, everyone's got so much going on. So how do you even see the people that you want to be seeing? I don't think it's the end all be all. I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's for actually probably a small percent of the population.
Yeah, agreed. I just in my own practice, I don't have a lot of experience with it. I have some though. And from the get go, and it could just be my age. It could just be where I was raised. I just am like, there's just so many ways it could go wrong. There's just so many ways. When you, the more people you bring in, the more ways it can go wrong. Like that's all I'm saying. And that the likelihood that, especially if it's a polyamory situation with 3 people, the likelihood that one person is going to feel like the odd man out is this is also just like regular, like life. You know what I mean?
But it's also okay for someone to feel like the odd man out, and then you can, or the odd person out, because then you could deal with that. Okay, what's coming up for you? Why is it coming up? What are the stories that you're telling yourself? I think it can be like a rich, complex experience if you're willing to deal with everything that comes up with it. I think it's really challenging. That being said, I know several people, couples that have been in polyamorous relationships for their whole lives, for over decades, and it works really well for them. So I can't
Wow, I
poo-poo it.
want to interview those people.
I can hook you up. They're a fantastic, fantastic couple.
Yeah, but they're a throuple.
No, they both have. I mean, I don't know what their current polycule is like these days, but
What word did you use? What?
a polycule.
Which is
That's
the
sort of like,
formation?
yeah, the relationship constellation.
Got it. Okay,
You know, like,
polycule. Wow, I
yeah,
didn't even know.
yeah. I think that's the right word. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a poly expert. But I think generally they are each other's primary partners, and they have other partners, boyfriends,
Oh
girlfriends.
yeah, and it's interesting. I know there's a lot of different formations that can be, and I can see how that could work more than people trying to be three people equally in a throuple type of a situation. Anyway, I'm just
Yeah.
interested because I know that this is something, since everyone in the world asks you everything, I know that you have probably talked quite a bit about polyamory or whatever.
I've also been the boyfriend of someone who was in a marriage, actually, with somebody else, and so that was fun too. But I've never had like a primary partner and then other partners.
Right.
So if
Well,
that ever happens, we'll come back and we'll talk all about it.
please, I'm so interested. All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I'm going to steal from. I just interviewed Kelly Corrigan,
Okay.
who's this fantastic interviewer. She reminds me of Terry Gross, but different, younger. Anyway, phenomenal. And she has a show on PBS. So anyway, I'm taking 2 pages out of her book.
Great.
And then I'm going to ask you my last question about boundaries. So first thing I'm going to say is name 3 adjectives that people think you are, and then 3 that you actually are.
I would say vulnerable. Okay, the 3 that people think I am is
Yeah.
vulnerable, sassy,
Mm-hmm.
and handsome.
Mm-hmm.
3 that
Sure.
I actually am is sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
funny, and moody.
See, they wouldn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to show them a little bit of the moody side, and they definitely know that I'm funny. At least I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm funny.
Yeah, I think you're funny too. Trust me, I'd know.
That's a sweet question. I really like that.
Me too. Thank you to her. She's
Yeah.
great. You should definitely listen to her stuff. She's so interesting. Jennifer Gardner, James Corden, like just these interviews, and many other people too. But there's something about someone who has the skills, like real interview skills, where like that shit is a skill. It's not just a conversation. She's like getting people to open up. It's great. Anyway, all right. I'm going to ask you a question about boundaries.
Wait, link in the show notes to her show.
Yes,
And also,
Shaun.
if you're not listening to Smartless, people need to listen to Smartless, specifically the David Letterman episode. Talk about a phenomenal interviewer. I mean, that was his whole 40-year career was interviewing people. That's a great episode. Smartless of David Letterman. Okay, I'm ready for the boundary question.
Okay, great. But that was great. Look, we're putting all these, you guys, all the links are in the show notes. Okay, so what has been your biggest boundary challenge, and how did you overcome it if you indeed have?
I still struggle with telling people that I need space in a loving way. I am someone who, my therapist and I have been working on this idea that I sometimes push people away, and I can be not only independent, but anti-dependent. I just don't want people to depend on me. And so sometimes in relationship, that means that I do require a lot of space, even though I do love connection and I love intimacy. I sometimes can feel overwhelmed and like I am taking on more responsibility than I'm willing to do in a relationship. So asking for space has been really, really hard for me. And it still is. I haven't really quite overcome that. what I do is I try to ask for it anyways in the most kind way possible by saying like, this is just what I need for me to take care of myself. Doesn't mean that I don't love you. Doesn't mean I don't want to be connected. This is just like the amount of space that feels good for me. And also I'm open to like compromising around the amount of space that feels good for you.
Oh, I mean, that you're such a good communicator, though, that there's something about hearing that. That's a very loving way of saying what it is you need. Now, it depends on how are the needs matched, right? Can that person, like you said, you could have the perfect words. And if that person is insecurely attached, they may be like, oh my God, you're breaking up with me, even if you weren't.
Oh, yeah, I know what that feels like. And it's not fun for anybody.
Not fun. So tell me one last thing. I know you're sort of just coming out of the dark at this point and with everything that you've experienced, but what is one thing that's lighting you up right now, or one thing that is giving a spark of excitement?
I'm starting to do or plan and about to launch some in-person retreats, which they really light me up. So I've got one in January in Sedona, Jan 5th, 6th, and 7th. Cool. And yeah, and and there's going to be more coming throughout the year because in-person stuff really lights me up. It really does. It's exhausting. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of logistics. It's not necessarily that lucrative, but soul wise, I think it's what my friend would call soul points, right? Yeah. It's hard. It's challenging. In the moment, it might not make sense, financially, energetically, all that stuff, but it does add like soul points. Like it's something worth doing, sort of like raising kids, when they're little, you're like, what am I doing? But then later you're like, wow, most amazing thing ever, which is one of the things that my dad told me on his deathbed was like having kids was the greatest joy of my life.
Oh, that is a really sweet thing or notion to leave you with, like how incredibly important, which of course you knew you were to him, but
he was talking about me.
Yes, he was.
And my brother. Yeah, but my brother, but my dad, basically I have a half brother from same mom, different dad. So he has a different dad and he's older than me. And so when my father met my mom, she basically had a 1-year-old and he just like took him in and raised him as his own.
Oh, that is just like big heart, loving, and really loved your mom.
And just head over heels. Oh. Head over heels. She was also the only person that wasn't interested in him at the office. He had like all the ladies chasing him and he only wanted her.
I love it. She was like, no thanks.
No thanks, yeah.
All right, my friend. So where can people find you easiest?
Yeah, Instagram, The Love Drive, Google The Love Drive, my website, ShaunGalanos.com. Link in the show notes, everybody.
I was going to say all the links and the link for the January retreat will also be in the show notes.
The retreat's going to be fantastic. And yeah, it's just been an honor to speak with you.
Yes. And we should do a retreat together, Shaun.
We should do a retreat. I mean, or we just hang in upstate New York,
That's right. I just redid my kitchen. Come visit, please.
Perfect. I'm coming on the farm. We're bringing Roger.
Yes, Roger, please. Thank you. I so appreciate you. You guys, everything you need to know about Shaun is in the show notes.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.